Hello fellow Earthlings, it's Libs, and today I'm going to be sharing my 5 favourite books of the year so far. So it is the start of April, and I thought everyone's doing their sort of quarterly wrap-ups, and I wanted to do something like that, but I don't want to do like a full wrap-up, so I thought maybe I should just break it down into sort of do my 5 favourite fiction reads of the year so far. I do have a few non-fictions that I've really been loving, but I think I'm going to save those for another video. So yes, these will be my 5 favourite books of the year so far. So the first book I want to talk about is one that I absolutely loved, obviously, but it's one I kind of picked up on a whim. I wasn't really sure about it, but I've heard sort of good things about this author, so I wanted to give her a go, and it was, a 2-hour audiobook from the library. It was a short fantasy novella. I was like, I can dip my toe back into the fantasy genre. I haven't read much fantasy for ages, and I thought, why not give it a go? And this is The Empress of Salt and Fortune by Nhi Vo. This is the first book in the Singing Hills cycle. It's a tiny little novella. It's about this cleric who goes on a journey. They meet this older lady, and the older lady starts telling the cleric about her life serving the previous empress and all the sort of dark and sad things that happen, the more joyful things that happen. And in many ways it's a very simple story, but the writing is phenomenal, the audiobook is outstanding, and there's just something about it that really draws you in, and I'm quite desperate to read the next book in the cycle. I think there are 4 books out so far, and I know 3 of them are at my library, so I'm definitely going to be continuing. I don't know what else I can tell you without spoiling anything, but it is phenomenal. A book I just read and absolutely loved was Pride and Prejudice by Jane Austen. I mean, we all knew that I was going to be obsessed with it. I'm obsessed with the BBC miniseries. I've watched it probably 30 times, so I figured it was about time I read the book. I don't know what I can say about Pride and Prejudice to convince you to read it if you're not already convinced, so I won't harp on about it for too long, but it is just a phenomenal story about 2 people learning to accept and love each other despite having not the best initial reactions to each other, and the chaos of their family and friends. And it's just chef's kiss, phenomenal, fantastic. If you're a fan of the movie or the miniseries, please read the book. The book also gives you a few little extra details about what happens at the end, and I just had a great time. Next book I want to talk about is Someday Maybe by Onyi Nwabineli. I'm not 100% sure how to pronounce the author's name. But this book is... We know I like books about grief, apparently, and this is another fantastic one. This is about a woman in sort of her early-ish 30s whose husband dies suddenly and tragically, and she finds the body, and she had no idea that her husband was suffering or was in pain and needed help, and she feels terrible. Her mother-in-law is just treating her terribly and blames the wife for her son's death, and it's just about her learning to accept what has happened and her relationship with her family. And it's outstanding. The audiobook is read by the actress who plays Lady Danbury in Bridgerton, and that just adds a whole other layer of enjoyment to this story. I had a fantastic time with it, could not recommend it more. And then I have 2 romance books to tell you about. The first is again no surprise. It's People We Meet on Vacation by Emily Henry. I was not expecting to be in this situation where I was talking about an Emily Henry book as one of my favourite books, or giving it a 5-star, but here we are. This is a story of two friends who were best friends in college, and they no longer speak anymore, but they used to go on a fantastic holiday together to fun new places every summer, and they decide that they're going to go on one more and try and reconnect and rebuild their friendship, and it's great. It is a bit predictable, but I love the characters. I love that the characters are not afraid to call themselves out on their own behaviour, acknowledge when they need help, and go to the effort of getting themselves help, which I really, really appreciated. I also love stories about travelling and visiting new locations. So, I mean, I was going to love this. It's very much like the Grumpy Sunshine dynamic, and, you know, he's tall and she's quirky, but, you know, it worked in this case, for me anyway, but I really enjoyed it. I'm actually going to change my mind about the final book. It's not going to be a romance. I very much enjoyed said romance, but looking at these two next to each other, I've got to be honest, I preferred Ordeal by Innocence by Agatha Christie more than the other romance book I was going to tell you about. That romance book was Thank You for Listening by Julia Whelan, and I loved it, but you know what, I enjoyed Ordeal by Innocence more, so I'll tell you about that instead. This is a standalone Agatha Christie novel about a family where the mother was murdered and one of the adoptive sons, was sent to prison and died in prison for this murder. And then one day, this guy shows up and says, actually, I was the son's alibi. He couldn't possibly have committed this murder. Somebody else in this house has to be the murderer. And it's all about finding out who that murderer is. And it's just, I know this is a really popular Agatha Christie, so you probably know the story. All the adaptations I've seen of it are actually kind of nothing like the book, so I would recommend reading the book if you want a more true version of events. Because there's one I've seen that has Bill Nighy in it, and it got some bits right and then some bits are just very, like, it takes the whole story in a completely different direction. And then I've seen an adaptation where they turn it into a Miss Marple mystery, and that also goes in a very different direction, so in a lot of ways. So I definitely recommend reading the book. It's phenomenal. I had a great time with it. And those are my 5 favourite books from the previous quarter. Let me know what you've been loving down below, and I will see you next time. Bye.